everybody. It's Dr. Sarah Gottfried. Welcome back to the Health Bridge. I'm here with my awesome co-host, Dr. Pedram Shojai. Pedram, how are you?
Fantastic. Nice to see you, Sarah. Hello, everybody.
Nice to see you too. And we are honored today to be with Dr. Chris Northrup. Chris is one of my longtime mentors. She's a board-certified OB-GYN. She's been a professor of medicine. She's a pioneer in women's health. In many ways, I feel like you need no introduction, Dr. Chris Northrup. Welcome to our show.
Thank you. How much fun is this?
We're so excited to have you. And I love that we're talking about aging today. And I wanted to kick off by asking you about something that I've heard you say. You said something like, the current conversation that we're having about aging is deathly boring. So I wanted to start there. Tell us what you mean by that.
Oh, it's an organ recital. It's, this is what my kidneys are doing and my blood pressure. And it's like this cultural trance that after the age of 50, we're destined to deteriorate. I got the funniest note today after my Hay House radio show on Facebook. A woman's 8-year-old son was looking at a picture of me on Facebook, and he's looking over his mother's shoulder, and he says, "Oh, she's young old. Mom, you know how a lot of people are old? Well, she's young old." And then he goes back to playing. And that's really what we're talking about. We want to be young old. And this, we all know this because of Dr. Royson and Oz's work, real age. There's a huge difference between chronologic age, the age on your driver's license, and biologic age, the age of your cells. And since we're replacing all of our cells about every 7 years, the only thing that causes them to deteriorate is the belief and the behavior that stems from it that it's normal to deteriorate. It is normal in our culture. That's the norm. But it isn't natural, and it doesn't need to be that way. And Dr. Mario Martinez studied about either 500 healthy centenarians on 5 continents or 700 on whatever. He studied a lot of them. And he found out the healthy centenarians have the same things in common, whether they're in Mongolia, whether they're in Russia, whether they're in the United States. They live in subcultures that actually believe in health and support health, the causes of health. Can you imagine? They don't go to doctors. Their doctors are all dead. They indulge in rituals of pleasure, maybe a cigar, maybe a whiskey, something fun. They're not codependent. They take care of themselves. Like, I'd like to interview you Saturday morning. I'm sorry, I can't. That's my tango lesson. So they don't care what the cultural trends are. And then they also know about righteous anger. Righteous anger is a cause of health for when your innocence or your generosity or your whatever has been threatened. It is healthy to have righteous anger, not staying there in low-level resentment, but righteous anger. Like if you see a waitress being mistreated, standing up and saying something is actually a health, it's a thing to do for your health. And then my all-time favorite, they hate being around old people. And some of the old people they're talking about are 30 years younger. So you want to be around people who are young old, not old old. And you and I both know there are old people who are 20. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's really what I'm talking about. And of course, as you well know, because you're both docs, so you see it every single day, when someone comes in, you already kind of know how it's going to go for them. Because isn't it true? Because they're starting in with the complaining, and then they do the ageist thing. At my age, it's, normal to lose my memory. It's normal to lose my sex drive. It's normal for my joints to hurt. And none of that needs to happen. I mean, the story I love is, someone coming in with knee pain. Well, what do you expect at your age? And here's the answer. I expect my right knee to be like my left.
I am so enamored by the concept of this righteous anger. I think that's awesome.
Isn't it?
It's like a pressure release valve that we're not allowed to have in our culture because everyone's got to be so nice. But the righteous element is just really cool.
Isn't it cool? Yeah.
I want to talk about these pleasure practices, and Sarah knows I was going to go there because that to me is just so fun. And I'd love for you to elaborate on that. Like, what do you recommend? Like, what seems to work and what seems to be overboard on that?
Okay, and I love that what you're really asking is, what is the difference between a ritual of pleasure that's health enhancing and an addiction where you just go down the rabbit hole? Okay, an addiction is 5 Ben & Jerry's ice creams a day. A ritual of pleasure is a small scoop of, if it were me, it would be New York Super Fudge chunk, but just a small thing. But eaten mindfully. Jenna LaFlamme, who wrote Pleasurable Weight Loss, says pleasure is the new mindfulness. So it's being present with the actual ice cream as you're eating it. There's some chocolate out of Brooklyn called Mast Brothers. It is the best artisanal chocolate I have ever had. And what I notice is, if I'm mindfully eating each morsel, I don't need much. I mean, maybe I need a little square. But if I'm mindlessly nervous and I'm running to a million different appointments, I can consume an entire bar of that chocolate and never taste more than the first bite. So, and that's the work of Ellen Langer, the mindfulness portion of the program. And I think that's what's missing for so many people, actually being present. I mean, it really kind of goes back to Ram Dass, right? Be here now, be somewhere else later.
This is so good. And Chris, your bio is so long, I didn't give the entire thing at the beginning, but you're many times over a New York Times best-selling author, and you have this new book, Goddesses Never Age. I love the title. And there's a few places I want to go. I'm especially interested in this point you made about codependence, how that doesn't go with aging and not aging, and kind of biology versus chronology. So can you talk a little bit about what motivated you to write this book, and then also a bit more about the codependence?
Yes. When I went through a divorce in my late 40s, was married to an orthopedic surgeon, I believed, like so many people in our culture, that the answer to my dilemma lay in a new relationship. All I would have to do is find the right man who would complete me, and then I would ride off into the sunset. That's all I needed. But I was really worried that I had drunk the Kool-Aid of the culture, the ageism of the culture, so I was really worried that I would never find anyone. So therefore, I began a quest to, about that time I wrote The Wisdom of Menopause, because I realized, oh God, I get what this is. This is like an entire redo. This is a rebirth of your essential self. You come back with the wisdom of a 12-year-old before she got her period, when she's really mouthy and knows what she wants, and then you reemerge. So your hormone levels go back to like age 12, nothing wrong with that, and then your wisdom is there, but now you know how to write checks and have a credit card. So now you've got the ego structure to reinvent yourself. So I thought, I will have to become, and I'm serious, this is just the truth, I will have to become the kind of woman that the kind of man I'm interested in would be interested in. And that was my motivation. I mean, it's not high and mighty, man, it's just human. And what happened in the ensuing time, I took Mama Gina's School of Womanly Arts course, Mastery. I taught there. I learned Argentine tango. I learned how to surrender to the lead of a man. I learned what pleasure is in my body. And I became, what I did actually was create the inner sacred marriage, the Hieros Gamos it's called. So I did meet the perfect man, and it happened to be the male part of myself. And I actually love that, because usually what we do, right, we say to someone, oh, the answer is outside of you. You just have to find the right person, the right diet, the right clothes, be at the right weight, and then you'll be happy. The truth is, it's all an inside job. So I found, in fact, a couple things happen. My eyesight has improved. When I go to for my annual, I wear contacts. He'll say something about, this is weird, your prescription is not changing, it's a little less. And then he'll try to confabulate some excuse for that, because as you know, in medicine, if the diagnosis doesn't prove to be what you thought it was, then what you thought it was wasn't right in the first place. That's what we do. It's not possible for this to ever go away, so I must have had it wrong in the first place. I got taller. I'm more flexible. All kinds of things happen. I got happier. I actually love my own company. I mean, for the first time in my life, I'm a Libra. I've got 4 planets in the 4th house, the South Node. I don't expect you guys to know astrology, but let me just say, I am so wired for relationship. I mean, honest to God, I could have a codependent relationship with a fence post. I really could. Oh my God, that fence post, it looks like it doesn't like me today, you know? So so the codependence thing, let me get to that, because this is important. Mario Martinez, in his book, The Mind-Body Code, points out that every tribe keeps its members in line, every tribe, with, it's called going beyond the pale, and a pale literally means a fence. And so we keep our members safe only to the extent that they don't go beyond the pale. And we know as doctors, I remember, you know, back in the day when I was really doing a lot of deliveries and so on, one of the my fellow residents said, just remember this, if you're going down, take someone with you. Meaning that if it looks like you're going to be sued, make sure you got some colleagues on your side. So in medicine, there's a very clear pale. Don't go beyond that. And back in the day, when I was interested in nutrition and macrobiotics, I mean, I was made fun of beyond belief that, you know, no one was ever talking about nutrition back then. So I just tried to keep myself in the jokes, you know, that we make at Grand Rounds. So the tribal pale, do this and we'll protect you, but don't go beyond it. And if you do, here are the 3 wounds that all tribes punish their members with: abandonment, shame, or betrayal. And so therefore, because we're herd creatures, because we need each other desperately, we will put up with what Martinez calls known misery and not risk unknown joy and pleasure. And frankly, that's what ages us. Because we stay in safe enclosures. This is what my family does. This is what we always do. So when we say the diseases run in my family, all the belief systems that go along with that disease run in your family. I've always been interested in the black sheep of the family, the one who doesn't get any of those things. Oh no, that's Sally. She's not like us. She doesn't get that stuff. Right, same genes though, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, we know in identical twins, 80% of what happens to them is environment, and they've got the identical genes.
So we're talking about memes and programming and all sorts of awesome stuff. I mean, so women in our culture are so subjected to this fear of aging that it's so overwhelming to a lot of people. And what I'm hearing in this goddess speak here is you helping them liberate themselves and really kind of developing a new relationship with how to age and how to get older. So how do we hack that? How do we step out of that and ignore some of that past programming and stop aging psychologically, if you will, or in our belief systems and thrive?
Yeah, well, the ageism thing, first of all, what is growing older? It's the opportunity to move through space and increase your competence and your knowledge and your value. That's what it really is. If you look at guys like Quincy Jones, you look at Annie Lennox just nailing the Grammys, Joni Mitchell, you know. So what I've done, by the way, I've created a Ageless Goddess Pinterest board because all the examples of these rockin' women over the age of 50, I want to put on there so you can see them. Helen Mirren, by the way, is now the face of L'Oreal. So let's start there. So you begin to look for the outliers. You look for the people who are not following the meme and the program. Then I back it up with research. So for instance, the research of Ellen Langer, where she did that amazing experiment back in, I think it was the 90s, early 90s, where she took a bunch of guys, took them to a monastery, and they had to live as if it were the years of their prime, like the 50s somewhere. And she measured their eyesight and their hearing and their everything that we associate with deterioration over time. And they had to live as though it was 1955. They had pictures of themselves in their prime, you know, high school football team. Even later, this wasn't in her report, when the time ended, the week, These guys started to play touch football. They carried their own bags. They looked 10 years younger. They repeated all the tests, pulmonary function, cardiac output, all of them. And they all took about 10 years off their biology by acting as if. And Ellen is now doing a study, and this one is very courageous. In, what's that place? San Miguel in Mexico. She's gotten the innkeepers to give her rooms, and they're taking a group of women who've been diagnosed with breast cancer, and I think they're pretty advanced, but she's taking them back to live as they lived, as if it's the years before the diagnosis, to see what will happen with disease states and immunity. And that's how powerful the mindset is. And so one of my things is, don't ever let an old person inhabit your body. Like, just when you start and you hear yourself. So don't say things like, I'm having a senior moment. Joan Borsenko points out that as we get older, we move more into our right hemisphere, and nouns do tend to drop out. So what do we say? I'm having a senior moment. What we should say is, I'm having a goddess or a god moment. I'm more into my right hemisphere where I'm connected with the whole universe. You'll eventually come up with the noun. I was on a plane and I'm going to Paris, first time ever. So that's the other thing. Do things that you've always wanted to do, but you've been waiting for the right time. The right time is now. Don't wait. I mean, I always wanted to learn Argentine tango. It's like, well, what are you waiting for? Like, when do you think that's going to happen? When your last blog is written? I mean, come on, let's do this. And so, I did it. And it was, frankly, it was harder than med school. But now, no, really, med school's easy. They tell you what to do, you show up, you do it, you got a lot of support. You go into a dance studio as a middle-aged woman where all the women who are 25 with long legs are getting all the dances. You got to bring some mojo to learn that stuff. So anyway, you begin to notice in your own head those messages. They'll be there. They'll be there. You're human. Oh, don't ever take the senior discount, because that's just a dumb move. I mean, my brother did that. He was going to save $25 on a JetBlue flight or something for the senior discount. He says, so here's what happened. I got to stand in line to prove that I'm a senior. Then I got to go stand in another line to verify. He said, by the end, I felt like a second-class citizen to save $25. It's not worth it. As Martinez says, you give yourself the message that because you're a certain age, you're no longer competent to have the money. Do you see how it absolutely, or the old, I'm at a fixed income. Do you know how the age of 65 was determined as the retirement age? It was Otto von Bismarck in 1880. And the average life expectancy was 18 months after age 65. And he wanted to give the pensioners a little time to rest before they died. Now, the life expectancy after 65 is 24 years. But when you tell someone your retirement age, and you go to one of those retirement communities, what is that saying to you? You're retired from usefulness. It's why I've read the average policeman in New York is dead 3 years after he retires. Because if you're a policeman or a fireman, your value is determined by your ability to get up and go out there and save somebody. Retirement is not the same. So you got to keep actively engaged.
So Chris, I want to come back to a point that you made that I really love about the mouthy 12-year-old.
Yeah.
And the truths that were so clear to us before we went through puberty. And I've heard you talk about, for women, this experience during the reproductive years of having a hormonal veil put on us.
Right,
where we accommodate, and we've got different sex hormone levels every day of our cycle, and we're over providing, and then we get to menopause where we have this clarity again, and as you described, we become mouthy again, but with wisdom this time, and a credit card. So can you talk a little bit more about that? And I'm especially interested in, for our listeners, what we can do to really stand in our truth.
Yeah, okay.
And so not age as, in our 30s and 40s and 50s.
We can stand in our truth the whole way through. And that's really what I'm hoping to incite this movement, because we know that the the aging process begins in the body. I mean, if you read the Bogalusa heart study, heart disease begins in childhood at age 8. We have adult onset diabetes happening in 7-year-olds now. We know that the changes we associate with aging in the fascia take place in 20-year-olds who sit all day at a computer. So there's all that. But in terms of the mouthiness you talk about, when you get your period, because the seminal thing about being a woman, seminal thing, ovarian thing about being a woman is getting your period. And because we've been shamed, because the worst thing that can possibly happen to you in the 8th grade is that someone will know you're having your period, it shuts down this voice. Now, the tonsils and the ovaries are connected energetically. When the period begins, this tends to shut down. It doesn't need to, but we do not have coming of age rituals for girls. We do not have rituals that bring you into the offices of womanhood. So we got a whole bunch of uninitiated mothers, that would be me, who were never brought into the offices of womanhood. And then, so what happens is the daughter then hits 12 or 13. She starts rolling her eyes at her mother, and her mother feels terrible about herself. Instead of saying, we're not doing that. We're not doing that here, honey. Here's what I did. And I want people to hear this. So when the girls started to roll their eyes at me, my daughters, with their friends, they'd come into the house and I'd say, hey, I saw that eye rolling. Did you know that the degradation of the feminine and women actually begins in the house, where mothers and daughters treat each other like this? It isn't even about men at all. It's internalized degradation. So that's going to stop, or I will come into your school and I'll give a lecture to your peers. Now, you know how they're so completely, like, what will my friends think? They have to call each other to decide, are we wearing the pink sneakers today? So the worst thing they can imagine is a mother who's going to stand for herself and come in and rip the veil off the eyes in class. And my friend Syl Reynolds and her daughter Eliza are doing amazing work with their book, Mothering and Daughtering. What Syl says is, it's where you really need to lean in. They're pushing you away because they really need you more than ever. You don't interfere, but you don't let them treat you like a peer. You stand up in your motherly wisdom. And when your mother does this, it gives you permission to do it. And then you don't lose this, and you don't lose the daughter, for like the 8. You know how another cultural meme is. The gremlins will come, and they will take your teenager, and you will not recognize her. And then somewhere around the age of 21, 22, they will give you back your daughter. That does not need to happen. That's purely cultural.
So as she starts to come of age, she starts to question what it means to be a woman. Her hormones are kicking in. She's starting to feel like a woman, but has no idea what that even means in a very complicated, confused society. Yes. And then that relationship with mom starts to become challenged, and because mom doesn't engage and step into some sort of powerful, sacred feminine, she doesn't have an example to live by, and therefore you have a teenager that just doesn't listen and doesn't care. That's fascinating.
Why the wounds of 8th grade have the half-life of uranium. I mean, they're passed down in families. I mean, they're just passed down, and what I say to women is, if your mother is a problem for you at menopause, you will become a problem for your daughter unless you bring this to consciousness. All it takes is one woman in a family doing it, and then the ripple effect is amazing. Like when I did Mama Gina's School of Womanly Arts, one of our exercises was to go to a bar in the West Village called Mocha, and it was a bunch of women, and they invited me to dance on the bar. I don't drink, I really don't care, but I danced on the bar, and there's a there's a fire station across the street, so the firemen are all looking in, and I'm up there dancing. I get down, and I say to the girls, well, I'm sort of proud of myself, I didn't fall. What did you think? And my youngest said, oh, Mom, it's hard to see you like that, meaning, please don't present yourself as a sexual woman because you're my mother and that's not okay with me. And so I had to work that through and realize I was an uninitiated girl inside, and I kept doing it anyway. And now my daughters are absolutely grateful, because what have I done? I've shown them life does not end at 50. So that means it won't end for them either. And now everything's good. And they've said, we're so glad you didn't let us shut you down.
This is very powerful. I feel like I want to go a little bit deeper into the woman who's an uninitiated girl.
Yeah.
Whether she's got the experience of having a daughter and she's, seeing maybe a mirror held to her, or maybe doesn't have a kid, but, is troubled by other things. Say she's in her 40s, she's in perimenopause, and, just feels like a basket case a lot of the time. I feel like that's related to this uninitiated girl.
Completely.
Can you connect the dots for us? Because I think we have an epidemic.
We have an epidemic. And what I love about your work is you're nailing in the physiology of the swinging blood sugar, which wreaks havoc with the hormones. So what do? We feel bad about ourselves. The cortisol levels rise. It forces us to want to eat more sugar. And then the insulin levels rise. And that completely messes up your hormones. And so it's like a vicious cycle. If you understood that you're in the birth canal and your soul is now rising up, just like the Kundalini energy is rising up from the base chakra, it's rising and it's hitting all those areas where you need wisdom. And you and I know, as gynecologists, that's what women's health is. That's what gynecology is. It is it's the unveiling of the second chakra wounding around sex, power, and money. And those are the issues that hit us in the uterus and the ovaries and in the clitoris and that whole area. And if we know that's the wisdom. I had a woman on my radio show today, and she hasn't had a man in her life for years, and she's thinking about it. And so what does she have? She has a terribly itchy rash from her anus, all around the vulva, all around that. So what I can do is talk to her about rashes are things just below the surface coming to consciousness. And it's fine. Go and get a steroid cream. That's fine. But if you don't get it, what your body's trying to tell you, it's going to just come back in another form. You and I know you do a hysterectomy. Oh, I'm cured. No, you're not. Next year it'll be your gallbladder. And after that, it'll be your breast. It kind of moves up the food chain, as it were. So if she knows what it is, she can tap in to this inner divine goddess who's always been there. Our bodies are such an ally. They won't let us get away with anything because they love us so much. So instead of, here's the Kool-Aid everyone drinks. Oh, I'm 40, my body is betraying me. Your body's never betrayed you. Your body is telling you what your soul's voice needs you to know. And it doesn't mean that you did something wrong. It doesn't mean any of that. Sometimes it's the only way to get your attention. I mean, haven't you had those patients who say to you, thank God I had cancer, it saved my life?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it takes a courageous person, very courageous, because what's easier? Known misery. Oh my God, I can just blame my body, and I can blame the fact that I'm 50, and then I never have to do anything about Ralph, who I'm living with, but I really can't stand anymore. Yeah.
It's so interesting because I'm on this call right now with two very accomplished medical doctors who are also women who had to go against the grain in a lot of ways because of all the cultural programming and crap that comes with, how society runs and what women are supposed to do and all that. So you guys had to swim upstream to a certain extent just to kind of, make your stand. And so my question is, what is it about these gender roles that have also kind of put women into boxes and kept them from that sacred goddess space? Because I'm hearing this really empowering message coming out, which is like, sister, just rock it, right? But there's just so much around in our upbringing and what society expects of women and all this. And it happens like dudes, we'll have a separate show about this. I think men are no longer men, and it's a big challenge on that side too. But this show is about the ladies. I'd love to hear your opinion on that.
Well, let me just, as a man speaking to me, one of the revelations for me after I set out on this quest to become the kind of woman that the kind of man would be interested in was the realization, which was, I got to tell you, shocking to me. Men want to please women. I did not know this. I didn't know this. So my first experiment was I was going home at Christmas and I asked my brothers to build me a bonfire because I wanted to do a solstice ritual. And when I got home, my brothers had built me, a bunch of logs and stuff. Honest to God, so big you could have seen it from space. All I did was ask, would you build me something that we can have at the solstice? And I have since discovered that men are so ready to stand up and serve the feminine. They're desperate to stand up and serve the feminine. But the feminist movement of the 70s, and we probably had to go through this. If you look at any ads from the 50s, tell your wife you love her, buy her a blender, this kind of thing. We had to go through this period where we actually believed that it was our job to become men. And that was really unfortunate. But it's like it was a stage we had to go through. The 80s, shoulder pads, dress for success. When I went in and interviewed for my residency, Dr. George Mitchell, who is now passed, was the head of my program. And he said to me, you're not going to get pregnant, are you? And I looked at him and I said, Dr. Mitchell, I'm not even going to have a dog. In other words, I am your man. I'm going to do this job. And so it really, because we were in a profession that, and even worse for me and Sarah, I was told at Dartmouth that all the dumb people in medical school went into OB-GYN and all the smart people went into internal medicine. And I remember thinking, that's the dumbest thing I ever heard, because this is the profession that takes care of the babies and the next generation. So that should be the smartest people, not the dumbest people. So something's wrong with this picture here. But I went into OB-GYN because I cried when I first saw a baby born. And I've always loved a lot of the guys that I worked with. They're real heroes. So I think that the conversation now is for women to learn the exquisite practice of receiving what the masculine has to give her. And here's the other. Don't expect men to be women. I mean, don't make him go shopping with you for dresses. Do things with your girlfriends. Don't expect him to do troubles talk. A lot of time we have to talk through something. We got to run it through both sides of the cortex 100 times to know what we're thinking. With a guy, they're pretty one-focused. You ask him a question, let them give you the answer, and shut up until they give you the answer, because they're actually going deep. They're going deep to come up with this answer. So we need to learn how to let men be men. And I got to tell you, it's an exquisite learning. Like in tango, man, a guy who's a good leader, I just melt into the pleasure of, here's the thing. In tango, your body as the feminine role, and because we have guys who dance together and women who dance together, but the follower role, she's like the wave and the leader is like the surfer. And he intuits what she wants and then leads it. It's like a martial art. It's amazing, and it does both of those roles. And also I take it back to physiology. What turns on a man? What gets a good erection? A turned on woman increases the nitric oxide in a guy, and then he can serve her. I mean, all you have to do is look at erectile tissue in the body with nitric oxide to understand the principles. And again, I learned it at Mama Gina's School of Womanly Arts, because we had some men there. And one guy who was like 72, he said, I don't need to use Viagra anymore since my wife started to take this course. So when she began to understand what gave her pleasure and learn how to receive it from him and ask for it without the blame thing, then suddenly his whole masculinity began to function on her behalf. That's what we need to teach.
This is so good. So Chris, I want to go back to a quote of yours that I heard many years ago, and I think it was actually third hand. I got it through Bethany Hayes, who quoted you, and she said something like the following: a woman is expected to be wholly in one place, usually work, and then she's expected to be wholly in another place, such as the home with family. with no model for wholeness.
Yeah.
And unless there's an ego structure strong enough to hold those roles, into that hole falls addictive behaviors, such as with food, grazing all day, drinking too much, working too much. So I hope I got the quote more or less right. But what I'm struck by is, I believe your new book is really this model of wholeness.
It feels like it to me. So I've sort of been a trail breaker person with a big machete out there and a front end loader, and but all the while never dropping into that place of men are the problem or modern medicine is the problem. It's not that. It's the paradigm we've all been brought up in. And I remember way back in the day, I'd say to my husband, well, the problem with women is, that thing, Madeleine Albright said the same thing. Women are always guilty. If you're at home, you feel like you should be at work. If you're at work, you feel like you should be at home. And my husband at the time said, work is work and home is home. And I thought, whoa, but it's not that way for me. I mean, it's like I got them both traveling in my head all the time. What I'm seeing happen that I love is I'm watching this next generation, the millennials, if we have to put them in a box, which I don't like to do, but let's say the women who are 31, like my daughter, and they're understanding that they can have a whole life. And I think more and more men need to also have a whole life. What have men been expected to do? Move every 5 years with the company, uproot their families. I have a friend whose father was a career officer in Vietnam. And she said it wasn't the fact that her mother was schizophrenic that was so difficult. It was the fact that they moved every 3 years. So we need to be grounded somewhere in Mother Earth, get our roots somewhere. And this is going to help men as much as women. I think women, the feminine, let's call it the feminine, is now leading the way for much needed balance for both genders, for both. It's a movement that I see for everybody, really.
So this is so apropos. Today is my wife's 35th birthday, and she's a dentist. And we're talking about having a second kid, and she's trying to figure out this career / mama bear energy balance. Yeah. And it is such a challenge, right? Because, you do all this work to get into this position, to have your career, and then you almost have to forego all of that to kind of be the mom that you want to be. And when you're not there, you're completely guilty. And so, I'm watching this, kind of unravel in my wife, and I'm trying to be supportive, and I'm trying to, understand it all. But it is a very confusing place to be for a young woman in a world that has so many different memes that are competing. And unless you step into that goddess, it's like, whose advice are you going to take this week?
That's it. And that's the thing. When you step into that divine, ageless goddess inside, then you're grounded in what is true. I remember I was 34 when I had my second child, and I thought, oh, how am I going to do this? How am I going to love her as much as I loved the first? And I don't know how we're going to do childcare. He was an orthopedic surgeon. I'm an OB-GYN. We're literally passing off the kids in the parking lot, in their car. It was insane. One thing that I would say to every woman in the place of your wife is life is long. It's long. And my daughters and I have an amazing relationship. They have forgiven me for all the times when I was on call. And more than that, and this is really important, I am not relying on them to create all the juice in my life. And this is another thing that happens with women who stay home with their kids and they always just wanted to be a mother. And then the kid starts to have friends outside of the home. Like when they're 7, 8, 9, they adore you. They want to be with you all the time. And then about age 12, can I bring a friend? And then they go to college and they have their friends there. So it's really important that mothers have an identity separate from being a mother, because that is a dead end. Sarah and I can tell you the number of women who, I don't know how it happened. I just got pregnant, and they're 44, 45. The second largest group having abortions for unintended pregnancy are women over 40. Why? because they're so ambivalent about this next stage that the default setting is, let's have another kid. At least I'll know what I'm doing for 20 years. Then we got the helicopter parents now going to every game, every soccer game of their kid in college. Like, when is it going to be over? You got to have your own life force, your own identity. Then you'll be a gift to your children. But listen, the stuff about I remember, when it was time how do I choose a subspecialty? Okay, well, I've just gone through a residency in OB-GYN. Now everyone's doing the subspecialty, like perinatal medicine or endocrinology. I remember thinking, wait a minute, I have been following that carrot on that stick for this long. I think it's time that I stopped. But in academic medicine, you both know, you never stop. You got to get this accolade and that accolade, and you keep going, and finally you realize, wait a minute, the other thing I saw at St. Margaret's, the former St. Margaret's Hospital for Women, I saw all these old attendings come in every Saturday, and they'd read the paper. They didn't have any patients in, but they had never been home for their families. They completely wrecked their lives, and now they're retired. They don't know what else to do. It's like a horse running around a thing with a yoke on them. So it's really important that we develop ourselves and our own life.
I love that. Now, I want for our listeners to go over to Amazon and buy your book, Goddesses Never Age.
Yeah.
And I know that they are going to want to continue the conversation with you. What are some of the best ways that they can hear more about what you're up to and the work that you're doing, the revolution that you're creating?
That's it. This is the movement. Okay. So sign up for my e-news. I've got a big Facebook community, Instagram. My hashtag for everything on Instagram and Pinterest is Ageless Goddess. So I've got that going on. I have an e-course coming up that will launch March 15th. This is an 8-week course. I want women to do it with their friends, maybe their mothers, daughters, so they can all move through the course together. And then I have a PBS special that will begin to air nationwide February 28th. I'll be in Los Angeles and all over the country. But for PBS, it's called Glorious Women Never Age. So that's what's coming up.
Awesome. Well, it's been such a pleasure to have you with us today, Dr. Chris Northrup. It's just amazing the work that you're doing in the world. I feel like I can't say enough about the way that you've been such a trailblazer and pioneer in changing our view of the female body and everything that can go right with the female body, which is, I think, one of your taglines. And it's you've been such an inspiration to me and to generations of women who have gone into the area of women's health. I'm just so grateful to you. Thank you for joining us today.
What a pleasure it's been. And I've loved having you on, a guy. How great is that?
every once in a while we're handy, huh?
Yeah, it's great.
It's to me, this is a very refreshing conversation because, empowered women are beautiful and sexy, and needy women make you run the other way. And so I think this is an amazing conversation that every woman needs to hear, because what we really want to see is the goddess, right? And you're right, we will do whatever we can to serve the goddess. And so when a woman is sitting in her power, it's the most beautiful thing in the universe.
Oh, thank you. Great.
I feel like that's the most beautiful note to end on. So thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Chris Northrup. Thank you, Pedram, for being with us today. And we will see you guys next time. Thanks for joining the Health Bridge.
Thanks, everybody.